I wasn't looking for ghosts when I opened those filing cabinets in the basement of the old Danvers State Hospital. I was researching patient care reforms in 19th century psychiatric hospitals when I stumbled across something that shouldn't exist. Something that challenges everything we think we know about the great asylum movement of Victorian America. Standard archival work examining how American asylums documented their patients during the great institutional expansion of the 1880s and 1890s. The period historians celebrate as the triumph of humanitarian reform over medieval cruelty in mental health care. The kind of meticulous record-keeping that defined professional medical practice and legal accountability in an era of systematic mental health reform when America was supposedly transforming psychiatric treatment from punishment to healing. The research had taken me through dozens of institutions across New England and the mid-Atlantic states, crumbling administrative buildings where patient files stretched back over a century, documenting the evolution of American psychiatry from crude restraints to therapeutic intervention. Medical records revealing the gradual development of professional standards, diagnostic criteria, and treatment protocols that would eventually transform asylum care into modern psychiatric medicine. The normal trajectory of institutional reform and medical progress that every textbook describes. But tucked between the normal admission files were others, different entirely. Files that violated every principle of 19th century medical documentation and legal procedure I had studied. Patient folders containing detailed institutional records, medical observations, and work assignments spanning years of asylum life. Complete documentation of institutional existence, chronicling daily routines, behavioral assessments, and administrative assignments with the precision expected from professional medical facilities. Yet no admission paperwork, no family history, no court commitment orders, no physician referrals, no record of who these people were before they entered the system. File after file of individuals who seemed to materialize inside asylum walls as if they had never existed in the outside world. The Danvers State Hospital in Massachusetts preserved the most extensive collection of these anomalous files, hidden in storage rooms that hadn't been disturbed for decades. Patient number 247, admitted sometime during the winter of 1891 according to internal institutional records, though no external documentation supports this date or explains the circumstances of his arrival. Male, approximately 35 years old, based on physical assessment rather than birth records. Brown hair beginning to show gray at the temples, blue eyes described as intelligent and alert in staff observations. Clean-shaven face that suggested regular access to grooming facilities. Height recorded as 5 feet 10 inches. Weight fluctuating between 165 and 170 pounds throughout his documented stay, indicating adequate nutrition and physical health. Skilled in carpentry and metalwork, according to workshop supervisors who noted his ability to repair complex mechanisms, construct furniture for institutional use, and train other patients in woodworking techniques that required years of professional experience. Staff reports consistently described him as cooperative with institutional routines, punctual for work assignments, and respectful toward both staff and fellow patients. Medical examinations conducted monthly found him in excellent physical condition, with no documented psychiatric symptoms, behavioral abnormalities, or mental distress that would typically justify institutional confinement in a psychiatric facility. Yet no family listed in any records. No previous address recorded despite obvious education and skilled trade background. No employment history despite clear professional training. No physician referral explaining his need for psychiatric care. No court commitment documenting legal proceedings. No correspondence from relatives inquiring about his welfare, despite years of institutional residence. Just a man who existed only within asylum walls, as if his entire life had begun the moment he appeared in the Danvers State Hospital workshop. Here's where it gets strange. The medical observations span 4 years. Detailed monthly reports documenting his physical health, work performance, and behavioral patterns. Staff notes describe his quiet demeanor, his expertise with workshop tools, his ability to organize other patients during group activities. Everything you'd expect in professional medical records. Everything except an explanation for why he was there. The Utica State Hospital in New York preserved similar documentation. Patient number 156, female, estimated age 28. Red hair, green eyes, 5 feet 6 inches tall. Records show exceptional literacy skills and administrative capabilities. Assigned to manage patient correspondence and institutional filing systems. Documented as remarkably intelligent and demonstrates leadership qualities among female patients. 4 years of institutional records, 0 background information, no family inquiries, no legal proceedings, no medical history explaining her need for psychiatric care. Consider what this means. Asylum admission during the 1890s required extensive documentation. Family petitions describing concerning behaviors, medical evaluations from qualified physicians, court orders when commitment was involuntary. Legal safeguards designed to prevent arbitrary imprisonment. These were not casual decisions. Institutional commitment meant loss of civil rights, separation from family, indefinite detention under medical authority. Yet here were patients who bypassed every protective procedure. The Buffalo State Hospital documented patient number 334, male, approximately 42 years old. Records span from 1893 to 1897, described as possessing extensive knowledge of mechanical systems and supervises institutional maintenance operations. Staff notes indicate he repaired heating systems, maintained electrical equipment, and trained other patients in technical skills. Medical examinations found him in excellent physical and mental health. No psychiatric symptoms documented. No treatment plan recorded. No explanation for his presence in a psychiatric facility. Now consider the timing. These undocumented patients appeared during the massive asylum construction boom of the 1880s and 1890s. Enormous institutions rising in every state, the Danvers complex sprawling across 900 acres. Buffalo State accommodating over 3,000 patients. Utica expanding to house nearly 2,000 individuals. Construction happening faster than documented mental illness could fill the beds. The official explanation is humanitarian reform, removing the mentally ill from prisons and poorhouses, providing professional medical care in purpose-built facilities, the transformation of American psychiatry from punishment to treatment. Noble progress documented in medical journals and legislative reports. But there's another possibility, one never taught in medical school. The Pennsylvania State Hospital at Norristown preserved records of patient number 423, female, age estimated at 31. Documentation shows extraordinary musical abilities and responsibility for patient entertainment programs. Records describe her organizing concerts, teaching instruments, and composing original pieces for institutional performances. Staff notes consistently rate her as completely normal and demonstrates no symptoms of mental illness. 5 years of institutional documentation. No record of how or why she arrived. The work assignment records tell an increasingly disturbing story. These undocumented patients were not receiving treatment for mental illness. They were providing essential services that kept the asylum functioning as a self-sufficient institutional community. Patient number 247 from Danvers managed the carpentry workshop with the authority of a professional foreman, training new arrivals in woodworking techniques and maintaining asylum infrastructure, including furniture repair, building maintenance, and construction projects that would have required hiring skilled contractors. Patient number 156 from Utica handled administrative duties that demanded literacy, mathematical skills, and judgment including patient correspondence, supply inventory, and financial record-keeping that typically required professional clerical staff. Patient number 334 from Buffalo kept complex mechanical systems operational, including heating, plumbing, and electrical equipment that demanded engineering knowledge and technical expertise beyond what would be expected from individuals suffering from serious mental illness. They were institutional employees who couldn't leave, whose skilled labor sustained asylum operations while their legal invisibility prevented any claim to wages, workers' rights, or voluntary departure from employment. The institutional records document systematic utilization of their capabilities for asylum benefit rather than therapeutic activities designed to promote mental health recovery and eventual community reintegration. That should characterize legitimate psychiatric treatment. The correspondence between asylum superintendents reveals systematic communication about patient placement and institutional staffing needs that had nothing to do with medical care or psychiatric treatment. Dr. Edward Cowles at the McLean Hospital wrote to colleagues about securing appropriate personnel for institutional operations and maintaining adequate staffing through patient assignments, in language that treated human beings as institutional resources rather than patients requiring medical care. Administrative coordination, suggesting these were not random medical admissions, but planned institutional assignments based on labor needs rather than mental health. Requirements. The timing coordination across multiple facilities reveals systematic planning that exceeded individual institutional decision-making. The Taunton State Hospital in Massachusetts, the Middletown State Homeopathic Hospital in New York, the Friends Asylum in Pennsylvania, and dozens of other facilities preserved similar files documenting capable individuals whose backgrounds couldn't be traced and whose institutional roles served asylum operations rather than their own therapeutic needs. The Albany State Hospital documented patient number 511, male, approximately 39 years old. Records show assignment to financial record-keeping and supply management. Staff notes describe his exceptional organizational capabilities and thorough understanding of institutional operations. Medical evaluations consistently found him mentally sound, no psychiatric treatment administered, no family contact permitted, no discharge planning documented despite clear mental competency. 7 years of institutional service, 0 medical justification for his confinement. The pattern extends beyond individual cases. These undocumented patients appeared systematically across multiple institutions during the same time period. The Taunton State Hospital in Massachusetts, the Middletown State Homeopathic Hospital in New York, the Friends Asylum in Pennsylvania. Each facility preserved similar files documenting capable individuals whose backgrounds couldn't be traced and whose institutional roles couldn't be explained through legitimate psychiatric care. Cross-referencing admission dates reveals coordination. Clusters of undocumented arrivals coinciding with institutional construction phases. Patient populations expanding precisely when new facilities required skilled labor for operations. Individuals appearing exactly when asylums needed carpenters, administrators, mechanics, and teachers. 2. Systematic for coincidence. The Syracuse State Institution documented patient number 612, female, age approximately 29. Records show responsibility for institutional laundry operations and textile production. Staff observations describe her remarkable efficiency and capability to manage complex production schedules. Medical examinations found no psychiatric abnormalities. Educational assessments revealed advanced literacy and mathematical skills. No documented mental illness, no family information, no legal commitment. 8 years of institutional labor documented as psychiatric care. The correspondence between asylum superintendents reveals systematic communication about patient placement and institutional staffing needs. Letters discussing the transfer of capable individuals between facilities. Administrative coordination, suggesting these were not random medical admissions but planned institutional assignments. Professional communication, treating human beings as institutional resources rather than patients requiring care. Dr. Edward Cowles at the McLean Hospital wrote to colleagues about securing appropriate personnel for institutional operations and maintaining adequate staffing through patient assignments. Not language typically associated with psychiatric treatment. Language describing human resource management and institutional labor coordination. The financial records expose the economic incentive. Documented patients required expensive medical care, nursing staff, and therapeutic programming. Undocumented patients generated revenue through skilled labor while consuming minimal resources. Carpentry work, administrative services, mechanical maintenance, and educational programming provided by individuals whose legal status prevented wage demands or employment complaints. Institutional slavery disguised as medical treatment. The Vermont State Hospital preserved documentation of patient number 718, male, approximately 36 years old. Records show responsibility for institutional farming operations and food production. Agricultural reports document his management of dairy cattle, vegetable gardens, and grain storage. Staff evaluations consistently rate him as highly competent and essential to institutional self-sufficiency. Medical assessments found no psychiatric conditions, no treatment provided, no discharge considered, despite obvious mental competency. 9 years of agricultural labor recorded as psychiatric confinement. The discharge records reveal systematic barriers preventing release of undocumented patients. Legitimate patients with documented families could be released to relatives after treatment. Patients with legal commitment required court review for discharge, but undocumented individuals had no family to claim them and no legal proceedings to appeal. Their institutional utility combined with their legal invisibility created permanent detention regardless of mental health status. Administrative convenience enabling systematic human trafficking. The Worcester State Hospital documented patient number 823, female, age estimated at 33. Records show assignment to institutional child care and education of patients' children. Staff notes describe her maternal instincts and level equals moderate, greater than exceptional teaching abilities. Educational assessments revealed fluency in multiple languages and advanced pedagogical knowledge. Medical evaluations found no psychiatric symptoms, no mental health treatment administered, no family contact permitted, despite obvious competency for independent living. 6 years of child care services documented as psychiatric institutionalization. The investigation reveals systematic coordination between asylum administrators and external authorities to identify and acquire individuals whose disappearance wouldn't generate family inquiries or legal challenges. Correspondence references suitable candidates for institutional placement and individuals requiring alternative arrangements. Professional language masking systematic procurement of skilled labor for asylum operations. Municipal authorities, charitable organizations, and employment agencies participated in systematic identification of vulnerable individuals, recent immigrants without family connections, skilled workers without permanent addresses, educated individuals experiencing temporary difficulties, people whose disappearance into institutional systems wouldn't trigger legal investigations or family searches. Pitch equals -2 st, volume equals loud. Human beings selected for institutional utility rather than medical need. The Connecticut Hospital for the Insane preserved records of patient number 934, male, approximately 41 years old. Documentation shows responsibility for institutional security and patient supervision. Staff evaluations describe his natural authority and ability to maintain order among difficult patients. Medical assessments found excellent physical and mental health. no psychiatric treatment provided, no documented mental illness justifying confinement, no legal framework enabling release despite obvious competency. 10 years of security services recorded as psychiatric care. The broader pattern reveals systematic expansion of asylum capacity beyond documented mental illness requiring treatment, institutional construction outpacing legitimate patient populations. Administrative systems developed for managing large numbers of capable individuals whose labor maintained asylum operations while their legal invisibility prevented escape from institutional control. Economic incentives driving systematic human trafficking disguised as humanitarian medical reform. Modern psychiatric care emphasizes patient rights, informed consent, and treatment focused on recovery and community reintegration. Professional standards require documented mental illness, legal safeguards against arbitrary commitment, and regular review of treatment necessity. Medical ethics demand that institutional care serve patient welfare rather than institutional needs. The undocumented patients of the 1890s received none of these protections. But in asylum archives throughout the Northeast, the files remain as physical evidence of systematic institutional practices that fundamentally violated principles of medical ethics and human rights. Documentation revealing administrative systems that treated human beings as property rather than patients, institutional resources rather than individuals requiring medical care and legal protection, records of people who existed in institutional limbo, providing skilled labor under medical authority while denied the legal protections, family contact, and therapeutic intervention that should govern psychiatric treatment in democratic societies committed to individual dignity and professional medical standards. They were not patients suffering from mental illness who required therapeutic intervention and compassionate care. They were institutional slaves whose disappearance from society served asylum economics rather than mental health. Care whose skilled labor sustained institutional operations while their legal invisibility prevented advocacy, appeal, or escape from systematic exploitation disguised as humanitarian medical treatment. Their files document systematic human trafficking operating under medical authority during America's great asylum expansion, revealing administrative practices that subordinated individual welfare to institutional efficiency during a period celebrated for progressive reform in mental health treatment. The undocumented patients of the 1890s represent evidence of institutional coordination that enabled systematic procurement and retention of skilled individuals whose labor capabilities served asylum operations while their legal status prevented the wages, working conditions, and voluntary employment that should characterize legitimate work arrangements in free society. The 1890 asylum files represent systematic institutional processing that challenged fundamental principles of medical ethics, legal rights, and human dignity that should govern psychiatric care in democratic societies. Documentation revealing administrative systems that operated beyond legal oversight and medical accountability, processing individuals whose institutional utility exceeded their documented mental health needs, whose skilled capabilities sustained asylum operations while their disappeared legal status prevented family advocacy and legal protection that should safeguard citizens from arbitrary institutional detention and exploitation. These records expose the dark reality behind America's celebrated asylum movement, revealing institutional practices that systematically subordinated individual rights to administrative convenience and economic efficiency during the period when psychiatric care was supposedly being transformed from medieval cruelty to professional medical treatment. The humanitarian rhetoric of reform masked systematic exploitation that treated vulnerable individuals as institutional property rather than human beings deserving medical care, legal protection, and respect for fundamental dignity that should characterize psychiatric treatment in civilized society. The undocumented patients existed in the shadows of institutional progress, their disappeared identities enabling systematic labor exploitation, while their skilled contributions sustained the very institutions that imprisoned them beyond legal accountability and medical justification. Their files remain as evidence that the Great Asylum expansion served institutional needs more than patient welfare, revealing administrative coordination that prioritized economic efficiency over human rights during America's transition to modern psychiatric care. Modern mental health treatment emphasizes patient autonomy, informed consent, and therapeutic intervention focused on recovery and community integration through professional medical care that respects individual dignity and legal rights. The institutional systems documented in these asylum files operated according to fundamentally different principles that subordinated patient welfare to institutional convenience, individual rights to administrative efficiency, and medical ethics to economic considerations that treated human beings as institutional resources rather than individuals deserving professional care and legal protection. The discovery of these undocumented patients forces uncomfortable questions about the true nature of America's celebrated asylum movement and the humanitarian rhetoric that justified massive institutional expansion during the late 19th century. Were these institutions primarily medical facilities serving patient welfare, or were they systematic processing centers for managing populations whose labor capabilities exceeded their documented need for psychiatric treatment? The evidence preserved in these files suggests institutional coordination that prioritized economic utility over medical necessity, administrative convenience over individual rights, and systematic exploitation over therapeutic intervention. The broader implications extend beyond psychiatric history to fundamental questions about institutional authority and individual protection in democratic society. How many other institutional systems throughout American history have operated beyond legal oversight and medical accountability? What other populations have been systematically processed through institutional frameworks that served administrative needs more than individual welfare? The asylum files represent a case study in how humanitarian rhetoric can mask systematic exploitation, how medical authority can justify arbitrary detention, and how institutional coordination can enable systematic violation of individual rights under the guise of professional care and social progress. These questions remain relevant today as we continue to develop institutional systems for managing vulnerable populations, including the elderly, disabled, homeless, and mentally ill. The lessons preserved in these archival files warn against institutional frameworks that prioritize administrative efficiency over individual dignity, economic considerations over patient welfare, and systematic coordination over legal accountability that should protect citizens from arbitrary institutional authority and systematic exploitation disguised as professional care and humanitarian intervention in democratic societies committed to individual rights and human dignity throughout all levels of institutional care and social service provision that affect vulnerable populations requiring protection from systematic abuse and administrative exploitation that violates fundamental principles of democratic governance and human rights. These rights should protect all citizens from arbitrary institutional detention and systematic exploitation, regardless of their social status, economic circumstances, or vulnerability to administrative manipulation by institutional authorities seeking to benefit from their labor and capabilities while denying them the legal protections and human dignity that should characterize all institutional relationships in truly free and genuinely democratic societies that protect individual rights and fundamental human dignity from systematic institutional abuse.